before I start, I'd like to thank my partner. I'm definitely going to miss him next year. I'd also like to thank my coach who's been with me this whole time, the opposition for what I know will be a great class, as well as all of you who are here, our lovely guests. I'm very happy you're here. All throughout high school, I played tennis. Before high school, I wasn't used to playing tennis. My dad actually forced me to play a sport, and I wasn't very excited about it. I went in playing doubles. Doubles made me feel pressured, and I had the choice between doubles and singles, but I thought that doubles would be easier since I had a partner, since I had more people in it. Since it was something that was different than what most people were doing, I thought that it was okay. However, I learned that I had to negotiate with my partner. Before every match, we had to look at different strategies, and we had to figure out who would go where, who would be at the net, who would be back, and it was too much negotiating. It made me feel pressured, and it didn't look out for my best interest as a player, because I depended on her and she depended on me. It wasn't in my best interest. So junior year, I switched to singles. This made me feel more secure, as I was able to make better decisions for my own personal interest. I was able to grow personally rather than with another person who maybe didn't help my game as well, or maybe she did help my game, but it was more personal and it was more helpful to my own security. This is directly relatable to the Keystone Pipeline. The opposition maintained that this is a value case. However, they maintain that the value is quality of life. The government would like to maintain that national security provides quality of life. Quality of life is much too vague. While it is a value that we must maintain, that we must address, national security is something that is much more important, much more feasible, and much more relatable to our current situation in America. Secondly, they said that national security is not our highest value, and they talked about public health. Public health is definitely a concern within the Keystone Pipeline, especially with their environmental concerns of aquifers of water as construction safety. However, we will go into this in our next case, and we'd like to go into their contentions. So the first contention was individual health. They said that there was no time for the permits. However, TransCanada has been working for 3 years on the permits. They've been working for 3 years with environmental communities, with construction workers, with the local communities, and there's tons of research that has been poured into this project. We believe that this is definitely a value of the word immediately, as they did address, saying that immediately means it should be enacted exactly now. However, this is not accurate because there's a process. There's a process of going through the president, there's a process of going through Congress, and while it does say immediately, it means that we should get it started now. It should immediately be started now. Next, they addressed community health. They didn't give an exact explanation of aquifers. However, that is an important issue, and they did talk a little bit about water issues. I would like to go a little bit more into aquifers and explain that while aquifers are underground, the main issue is at the top of the ground, where there's something called a recharge zone, and that is where potentially oil would come in. However, this is a very small part of the aquifer, and TransCanada has been working and recently negotiated a plan with Nebraska to avoid this recharge zone, to avoid the pipeline going through this recharge zone and going around it. And it's been negotiated, it's been talked about, and Nebraska is for this. Next, they talked about green energy. However, our president has been working with green energy and has been furthering America's progress within green energy, not only through oil with our pipelines as seen, but through wind and solar energy. So we've been working very hard on that, and it's in progress. After looking at their contentions, we'd like to look at their responses and how we respond back, and I think you will see that national security is a much greater value than quality of life, as it is much more feasible. They addressed our issue of economic growth, saying that prices in gas will grow up. However, Canada already has given us a discount with Keystone Pipeline, and they will maintain this discount as long as we negotiate with them. They have also said that they will look towards Asia if we do not agree with them. If we do not go along with their plan, they're already looking for other countries to go with, because right now, they're our #1 supplier for crude oil, so we definitely need to keep them in our system. Secondly, we talked about environmental preservation. They said that the jobs of construction workers are not safe. However, there are already thousands of pipelines in America where we have never heard of any drastic incidences where the construction jobs were not safe. Pipelines are already here. This is not a first-time pipeline that has no precedent, has no damage control, because they're already here. So definitely safety within the construction issue is not something that we really need to address. It's more about safety of the water in the aquifers. Next, they talk about energy independence. They said that this would not be independent because we are going towards Canada. However, we would like to look at economic security. While we will be more independent by looking at Canada, it will also make us more secure. It's democratically feasible to work with Canada as we have been working. As I said before, Canada is looking at other places. They're looking at Asia, and if we don't address this issue now, it's definitely an opportunity that cannot be missed. They did not address the past, present, and future analysis that my partner Jason talked about. He talked about the Embargo Act of 1973, and this is definitely something we need to look at, considering it's a similar situation right now with Israel and Iran. We're constantly going back. Should we support Israel? Should we not? What's going to happen with Iran? What are they going to do to America? This is the exact situation in 1973, and we need to look at what happened. What happened was that our oil prices went up 300%. We need to look at this precedent, and we need to address it. We need to relate it to now. While the situation isn't exactly the same, it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. We also need to look at, again, the Strait of Hormuz, when most of our oil comes from there, and Iran has already threatened to close it. We should not be teetering back and forth and trying to negotiate with a country who honestly doesn't feel the need to negotiate with us because they have the power in this situation. If we're able to work with Canada, we'll have the power because we'll have our own security. It'll be more independent, economically secure, and overall economically independent. So going back to my analysis of tennis, working as a singles player was much more secure for me because I was able to look at my own decisions and see what was feasible for me, relating this back to national security, providing the quality of life. Thank you.
Just like to start out with some thank yous, thanking my partner for helping me through this case in the entire year. Thank you to the government side who's come up with some great arguments today. I'd just like to say thank you to the Peanut Gallery, everybody for being here. It's really nice to see a lot of my professors in the audience. Okay, so today we're going to run through the flow as it's been going through. We're going to start by talking about the different values that are set up and some of the resolutional analysis questions, and then we're going to run through the opposition case and finish off with the government case today. So starting out with the government's last example of when she started to play tennis, and that she didn't really like playing in doubles because it made her dependent on someone else. She wanted to have this time to grow personally. However, this really doesn't fit into today's resolution, as we see that we're still going to be dependent. This is really what the case is boiling down to today, is that we are still going to be dependent. It won't be, maybe nearly as dependent on Iran, but we're still going to be dependent on another foreign country in Canada, which is what we're going to see as I work through the case. Going down to their values, the government team pointed out that you can't have quality of life without national security. However, lots of different nations provide, what they would consider to be national security, but really don't provide a quality of life for their citizens. We see this as the main issue that the Founding Fathers wanted for our country, was to provide the quality of life for its citizens. So that is really the higher value today. The team also talked about the definition of immediately. They said, well, that's wrong. It can't get started right away. However, they had the opportunity to define immediately if they wanted to. Within their first resolution analysis, they left it open. The opposition team, we defined it as starting right now. And that was within our means to do so. So going through the opposition case today. They really didn't touch too much on our first contention of individual and what that's like. They kind of touched on it a little bit in their case, but just to reiterate, we are talking about the safety and security of these workers and the fact that we don't have these permits. These permits have not been issued, they have not been signed, we do not have them. So therefore, that is a huge concern, the safety of these workers. As we saw with the BP oil spill, many workers were injured and killed. And what a tragedy for their families. And so we'd like to avoid that kind of a situation again. And if we had the proper safety permits, that might be one thing, but we currently do not have them. We have not seen them. Yes, I'll take your first question.
Do you have any examples of safety issues with a pipeline rather than oil rig?
I don't know of any specific examples. However, it's, to us, it's kind of one and the same. It's still a vessel to transport this oil and to, move it from one place to another. And so we still see that there are some issues when transporting oil. Our second point is that we need time to get the permits because we do not currently have them. Again, we do not have these permits, which is a huge concern. President Obama has not signed off, not seen these permits, so that is a huge concern for the opposition team today. Moving on to the second contention, they actually talked about the aquifers, and they said, well, maybe only part of it will be contaminated. But the thing is that if you have an oil, or a water reserve, and oil leaks in, most of it is going to be contaminated. It will be unusable. That's actually 30% of America's water source today. That would be devastating. In Texas, we currently see the water restrictions. You can't water your lawn at certain hours. You can't run the water at certain hours. This would only get dramatically worse. And for a state like Texas that's currently, having some drought issues, thankfully we had the rain this morning, but we're still having some water issues. This would be devastating to our state as well as our country. Not just on our personal water, but also think about all the farms that couldn't get water to grow their crops, water their livestock. So all of the food implications, there are just so many implications with this that at this time we cannot feasibly do this pipeline solely on the issue of the aquifer, all of the things that could go along with that for safety issues. Next, they talked about green energy, that President Obama has been focused on green energy. Well, we think that's great, but we think that they could do a lot more. Maybe all this money we are filtering into this Keystone pipeline could be moved towards green energy and promoting renewable resources. Next, the government team talked about their case, their first contention, that they still maintain that it would promote economic growth. However, we see that there's been different numbers that have come out about these jobs that might be created. No one's really got the same numbers. Homeland Security thinks it might be about 5,000 or 6,000 jobs. Other departments are coming up with all these numbers. The other problem is that a lot of these jobs are temporary. Once the construction is done, all these people will be, once again, without jobs. So this is really only a temporary solution and not a permanent one. Yes, I'll take your question.
Don't you think there'll be spin-off jobs other than construction?
There will be spin-off jobs other than construction, working to refine the oil. However, a lot of these jobs will just be the construction of the pipeline, and once they don't have any more jobs for that, then these people will all be laid off again because they'll probably have already filled the refinery jobs. Second, they talked about environmental preservation, and they actually talked about job safety, where they've never heard of these dramatic instances. That doesn't mean it can't happen. We still need to take measures to make sure it doesn't happen, which we could do through getting these permits, but we still don't have them, so it really doesn't make sense at this time to go through with the Keystone pipeline. Then they talked about their third contention, energy independence. How my partner really didn't touch on this very much, she didn't have a lot of time, but that the Arab oil embargo, gas prices did jump up really high. We don't see that this will happen again. It's kind of a drastically different situation. We're not currently dependent on this oil, and so we don't really see that gas prices will jump if we don't take this oil. They also talked about that Iran could shut off the oil at any time. Well, who's to say that if we go into this with Canada, they're not going to shut off the oil in the same way? They could do it just as easily if we decide, if we don't agree with them on something, they can easily shut it off. Lastly, they talked about future, that, America's not universally liked all the time, but this hasn't been a problem in the past. We're still getting oil from all these different countries. Personal opinions don't really coincide very often with economic things. If they're getting money from us, I'm pretty sure they're going to still do business with us. So just touch today on the different values, some of the definitional issues, the opposition case, and then once again the government case. And just like to thank you all for being here again.